Hey, welcome to Wolf's Watch. Wolf here. Want to give you a quick follow-up on what happens next in our Leading Change series. So we've been talking about leading change. Yesterday, we were really focused on Broadcasters Unite. That is still going today. Dr. Bill Janishek was just on. Hope you saw him. If not, you need to dive into that. I have the links to the locations for day 2 of Broadcasters Unite in the description for this episode. Coming back to leading change. So you're at that point where you've adapted, even given the current turmoil with the great shutdown and everything else has been happening. You've adapted. Now what? Right? So let's say you made a change or multiple changes. You've got those in place and are moving forward. What comes next? Well, here's 3 tips on where to go as the leader of your business, as an entrepreneur, as the leader of your business. What comes next in the process of leading change and adapting to your marketplace? Well, there comes a point where changes that you've implemented are beginning to, they've taken hold and they're somewhat routine. So the first tip is you need to continue to monitor. I do talk occasionally. Look, here it is. Here's the straight shot on it. Reporting. You need to have status reporting on what's happening in terms of are there not just red, green, yellow, is it going well? Is there an issue, or, oh, stop the presses, something's wrong. You need to go deeper than that. You need to, whether you're a solopreneur and doing this, or if you're having a team, oh, hang on, we've got Carol Hunt Otters in the house. Carol, it's great to hear from you. Glad you're part of the conversation. So coming back to the status reporting, even if you're a solopreneur, you need the discipline of doing this, because as you grow your company, you will eventually need to have this as a process to hand to people that are leading, that are implementing the change for you. With a larger company, and I'll say you got 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 people on your team internally, you'll have people that you are handing that off to, and they're responsible for implementing the change over a long period of time, that are managing the new process, the changed process. They were likely managing what you were doing previously. Now they've got the change in place. They need to continue to come back to you with status reports of what's being learned in the new, because you're already at a point where your initial plan came apart when you began to implement, right? Dwight Eisenhower, or the military. First, plan fails at first point of contact with the enemy. So as soon as you begin to implement, the plan has to change. The plan itself needs to be adapted to reality on the ground, and as you learn. So that process needs to keep building in, being built in. You need to have people, as part of their status reporting to you, bring up, one, what is being learned. And this isn't for you, this is for them, so that they are continuing to learn from the processes they're running, what they're experiencing, and secondly, what they're hearing in the people they're working with. There's going to be ideas coming up on how can we keep doing this better. This is where you instill continual improvement. You've just gone through big change, right? You get two types of change. Step back from the 3 tips. Here's a bonus. You get 2 types of change that you're dealing with. There's the day-to-day incremental improvement. As Darren Hardy was teaching recently, if you do just 0.1% per day, and Darren, I apologize, I probably got these numbers wrong. I should have written this down. This is just riffing it off the top of my head. The 0.1% per day in improvement across 10 years is 1,000% change. It's something on that order. It's massive. It's a little bit every day compounds, and that's what Darren's famous for, his compound effect book. If you haven't read it, it's a must read. Compound effect. You need to get a copy of that and study it. Have it as on your shelf as a reference. So it's that compounding effect over time. So that's the first type of change, the small steps. The adaptation, the leading change that we've been talking about, that's the other type of change. That's where you're going, bam, radical. We're going to change this now. We need to have a shift. The word pivot's been used a lot. There's Pivot in the sense of if you watch basketball and someone has a competitor in front of them and is blocking them, and they keep one foot tied to the, one foot firmly on the basketball court, and they pivot to be able to see around them to pass the ball off to another player on their team. So it's that type of abrupt, big change. And that's what we've been addressing here. So after implementing the big change, you need to make sure that your people that are managing your company, managing processes within your company, people within your company, are continually reporting on what they are learning, what their teams that they're responsible for are learning, so that you can drive that, continue have that effect, the compound effect, benefit from that. And through incremental changes, learn, find a better, today's the baseline. Somebody has an idea, you test that and then incorporate it. Small changes over time. You want everybody in your company doing that. It's a massive, massive differentiator, because how many of your competitors are doing that? I mean, be honest, how many people in your company are really doing that now? As opposed to they come in, they do their thing, they check out. Maybe they'll have 1 or 2 ideas a year, which is good. Yeah. That's great. It's a start. It's probably the average, I believe, and these are old statistics, it's something we can research together, or something you should look into. What are your competitors doing? What's the average for new ideas being implemented, from learning in order to improve processes within a company? I'll bet you'll find that it's less than 3 a year per employee. But what happens if people are doing this on a daily or weekly basis? Right? It doesn't have to be everybody making a change every day. That leads to chaos. But if you've got an idea a day, an idea a week, right? It's just like sales. You got so many prospects, right? So if you've got an idea a day coming in, that ends up 1 out of 7 is a solid improvement. So you've got 52 improvements per year that are solid. They can give you a good 3-4%. It was one of my frustrations in corporate America when I was working inside, changing companies, as opposed to being someone brought in from the outside. They were really happy with 3-4% change. Drove me nuts, because we knew we could get 30, 40, 50. In fairness, there's some valid reasons, especially in really, really large organizations, especially in publicly traded organizations, for not wanting to have those types of radical changes implemented, particularly on a regular basis. Ties into market value, stock market expectations, a lot of other things. That's why I don't work with those organizations anymore. Moves too slow. As an entrepreneur, you need to drive those incremental changes. And here's the second tip. Those will lead to big adaptations, big opportunities down the road. Because there's if you're familiar with market S curves, right? You have early adopters. A lot of times you have a new technology. This was originally done for technology, new markets. So you come along, you got a curve that goes like this, where something new comes in the marketplace. Early adopters, are the people that are willing to be on the bleeding edge. It's called the bleeding edge for a lot of good reasons. One of them being, most of the time it fails, and it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in those initial days. You're getting more effort for less result. And as more people adopt, you hit that knee, which is somewhere around 10 to 15% of your potential market adopts. So then that's what we see in viral now. Things go viral. They start out really slow like this, and more and more people, more resistant, and then bam, you got this big curve, and then it flattens, and it hits another knee at the top and flattens out. Well, that happens with learning as well. So and learning drives change. So your incremental changes over time will model that curve as well. You have a lot of incremental changes, and all of a sudden that comes to, whoa, a radical shift becomes possible only through that continual small improvement that happens on a regular basis. So that's the first tip. Keep evolving. Drive that through reporting from your team. What's happening. What are the lessons they're learning? How are they implementing it? So here's the second tip. Incentives. Are you incentivizing your team properly? Be willing to bet there's a gap there. And here's what I mean by that. Are your KPIs You keep performance indicators aligned with the new process. For one thing, a lot of times changes get defeated over time because the KPIs, the performance measures that people were held accountable to, were never realigned. The top level KPIs weren't adjusted for the new changes, and that did not trickle out. Even if they are, a lot of times it's missed in the performance appraisal process, where the performance indicators that people were held accountable to are not adjusted or not updated to reflect that, so it can align everybody. That's how you align behavior. You get what you measure in behavior, right? In terms of inside your company, if you've got 20, 30, 100 employees, you're going to get from them what you measure. That's part of the guidance that you're providing. You want them, they're moving on this path. You implement a change, you need everybody doing this. You need them doing it together. So you need to make sure that they're being held accountable, that their incentives, their performance incentives, and the performance measures they're held accountable to are lined up with that. Seen that way too often, where there's misalignments in the performance objectives. And the bigger the company, the bigger the gaps, because you get these, the siloing effect. If you don't have it, you've likely experienced it at some point in your career, especially if you have had the opportunity to work for a really large organization. You get these silos of activity, fiefdoms of power and authority, silos of technical ability, and in between the silos, what are those gaps between that? The same thing happens with the performance measures. So you need to make sure those performance measures are reviewed, aligned, and updated, so that you are measuring what you really want. Here's a challenge here's another bonus for you. This is a challenge with all KPIs, with all measures that we put in place in business, that you put in place in business. And this is just inherent in the nature of measuring stuff. Measures are always inaccurate. What we need is for them to be accurate enough to paint the picture that we need, so that we can hear what's going on in the organization with enough clarity that everybody's moving in the same direction. And there will be variation in that, right? There's always variation. We'll do a special session on variation all on its own. That'll be, as Dr. Jeffrey Luftig said, that'll screw your life up. That's a whole because it's such a big shift in perspective. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time. We'll come back to that. So the variation in the measure just needs to be accurate enough, precise enough, with the understanding that it is not perfect, never will be, so it can't be blindly accepted. But it creates a picture, so you get in a feel of what's happening with the organization. You have a sense, feeling that everybody's moving in the same direction, mostly, and that it is enough, right? The difference between a good leader and a bad leader is not everybody's moving in the same direction. Nobody's moving in the same direction. The difference between good leadership and bad leadership, as John Maxwell teaches, is the good leaders have fewer people going astray, to paraphrase what Dr. Maxwell teaches. So consider that, look for those gaps in the KPIs and in the performance measures, and get them buttoned up, and have your people experts, your HR experts, dealing with that, and work with them closely, and understand that the measures are going to be imperfect. And you will likely find that you're measuring some stuff that has absolutely no connection to what you need to get done. It's just convenient to measure. That's a very human behavior. There's a tendency to measure what can be measured, as opposed to doing the hard work of finding actual measures. And some things can't directly be measured. So it requires a set, if you will, of measures. It's how do you create that frame so that you can look at the measures and go, okay, this gives us the information that we need, so that we have confidence that things are working the way they are. It's like building a case in court. I've heard that analogy used previously. It's a good way to paint it. You go into court, and unless you can produce a video and DNA evidence of someone committing the crime, what does a lawyer have to do? The prosecution has to bring a body of evidence that says, that overwhelmingly convinces. So that's what you need to do in creating your measures. If you can't put a tape measure to it, or you can't weigh it in pounds. And a lot of times we're dealing with stuff like this. There's not a physical absolute measure that we can do, that we can create. So we can go, okay, that one measure, that's got it, right? We're shipping pounds of steel. So we know that if we measure the steel, we've got the chemical measure of it. So in the process, so that we know we're making what, we're going to get what we want in the result. And we do a physical weight at the end. That's the KPI on the output. We know we got what we want. Boom. That's all we need to do. Sometimes it's more behavior based, or it is a marketplace measure where it's not really fine, or you have wide variation. You don't have a high bit of second scenario, and as you don't have a high degree of confidence in one of the measures, so you need a couple, 2, 3 that can create that sense of, okay, all 3 of these line up. They're not exact, but they line up and point in this, to point in a direction. Creates an arrowhead for you. So you need to measure, regardless of how hard it is, what you really want to get, or have a system of measures that creates an overwhelming case for being pointed in the right direction. That was tip 2. Tip 3, you need to look over the horizon. You personally, now that you've adapted, now you need to look over the horizon so that you are staying connected to changes in their market niche. What are other people doing? What's the competition doing? Now, how do you do that? Are you reading? Are you networking? Are you spending time with peers? Or are you spending time with, with people that have built larger organizations? And are you doing that just inside your industry, or are you looking outside your industry? A lot of the game changers, a lot of the big differentiating opportunities that you'll have with your business will come from outside your industry. In airlines, I think it was the FedEx story, something along the lines of like the FedEx story. They looked outside their industry. They didn't look at airlines to see how to best move freight or to move people. They looked to organizations like UPS because they moved stuff. Well, what is an airline? They're moving people, they're moving packages. There's a fair amount of freight that we don't really hear of. And FedEx has built a huge freight operation where they ship stuff. They don't really ship people, they ship stuff. So they didn't look inside the airline industry. They looked outside to go, who's good at distributing? Companies like Walmart and Target that have built Amazon. Walmart and Amazon, they built big distribution systems. They looked outside of their industries to see what other centers of excellence were there that they could learn from. And then they followed a process that my technical mentor, when I was at McDonnell Douglas, called him Dr. J, because he was as unbelievably different from the basketball player that you can imagine. He always had taught this mantra of adopt the process, become adept at it, and then adapt it. So it's a learning model. Adopt it, adopt the knowledge, get some mastery behind it. That's the adept, right? Take it for what it is, see how it is done as it is, become adept at that. That's the mastery part. Now you can begin to adapt it with confidence that you're not going to pull a thread that undoes the tapestry. You see that a lot of times. You go, oh, this looks good. Let's make these changes and then implement it. And it's too much too fast. That comes back to the whole change, leading change that we've been talking about. If you try to do that lock, stock, and barrel, it's not going to work well. It's going to be too much. Carol, thank you so much. I'm glad this is helping. Glad this is connecting. Because this is intended to be practical, real world stuff, not textbook. Some of it, drawing references. I want to share with you who I've learned from, what I've learned from, but also from experience. So that's the third part. The look over the horizon. You need to interview that we recently released on our TV show with one of my mentors, Larry Broughton. He talked about how even though he has built a company with, think about this, more than 20 hotels. How big is your staff with that level of complexity? And some serious revenue, some serious financial considerations, major people considerations, because now you've got a corporate team of leadership, but then you've also got executive leadership at each one of the hotels, and a big staff at each one of the hotels to be able to work that, to see over the horizon. What he does is he manages. He talks about dividing his relationships or considering his relationships in thirds, so that a third of the people that he's associating with are peers, a third of the people are not as far along in their journey, so they're people he can contribute to, and the other third are people that are way farther along in their journey. They've built much bigger businesses. They have much more complicated stuff going on from a business standpoint in their lives, so that he can learn from them. So it's, peers, how are we getting through this together? People that aren't as far along in their journey, so who you can contribute to, and then who you can learn from. So how are you doing that in your life? Who are your mentors? Where are you getting information from? What are you reading? How are you seeing over the horizon? Who are you talking to? Who's your peer group? And how are you communicating and collaborating with them, so you can see on the sides, what's in the blind spots, where are your blind spots, and who is standing off to your side in your peer group, right? Because the people that you're learning from, they're out in front, they're farther down the road. Your peer group's around you, so they can see what's going on the sides. They got your flank, going back to military terms. And then the people that you can contribute to, they're behind you. So how are you spending time with them and collaborating with them so that you can contribute back? The power in contributing back, as you've likely already experienced, is there's a whole nother layer, several layers of learning that come with that. I was crewing an event that a mentor of mine ran a series of twice a year, did a huge marketing boot camp, Craig Duswalt. And I was crewing his event at one time, and someone that I had invited was there, and he was asking me, he's going, how come, what are you getting paid? And it's like, and this is a volunteer position. He's like, oh, you're not getting paid. He goes, well, why are you doing this? And we talked for a little bit, and it was clear that he was not going to get what he's doing. I looked at him and said, look, tell you what, are you getting good information from this event? It's like, oh yeah, this is great. And I go, fantastic. Good. Tell you what, take notes, enjoy it, come back again. You'll learn more. There's only as a 3-day event. If you can get 1 to 3, I always figure if I can get 1 to 3 gold nuggets that I can apply per day in a multi-day event like that, how much of a difference does that make in your life and in your business, right? So I told him, I said, do that and come back again. I go, and then consider crewing, because you'll find that you learn at a completely different level, right? Got to learn about how the event was run, but also it put me in a different position where now there's people in the audience here and I'm standing off on the side as a crew member, because that gave me a different perspective. I was getting different learning from the content that I'd already seen multiple times being delivered from stage. And there's differences. There's always new stuff coming in, but the bulk of it is the same. There'd be featured speakers that were different, which was always good. And the bulk of the same is just because I had a different perspective. It was possible to learn more from the same content because I was involved with the event differently. Had a completely different layer of learning that added into that. So it leverages it, right? It's like 2 times 2 as opposed to 1 time. It's not a good example. It's just, it leverages the learning. And I've always appreciated that in doing events. So it's like, how are you putting yourself in that position where you can look at things that you already know from a different perspective, and people around you can look at what you're doing and share their perspective on what they see, because they also have a different perspective on it, and then tap into your mentors. So it puts you in a position where you can see opportunities that are coming up. So you can see what's coming over the horizon before it comes, right? It's like, if you're watching the horizon at night, when the sun starts to come up, you can see the slow change. It puts you in a much stronger position. So how are you putting in your position to see that slow change, or sometimes rapid change? Stuff's coming up fast. If you can see it pop over the horizon, even if you have to respond quickly, if it's something that's a big, massive, sudden change that requires another pivot like you've just gone through, another big adaptation like you've just gone through, at least you've had some warning, right? It's not just smack, here it is. Oh my gosh, what do we do now, right? On the weekend, you're out of town, you come back, boom. Guess what? Your whole economy in your state's been locked down because of the pandemic. It's what you likely experienced in March or April. So food for thought. So that's today's 3 tips. After you've got the change implemented, keep evolving. Make sure your people are being held accountable for reporting what they're learning day to day, and that puts a process in place where they're drawing learning from from the people involved in the process, so they can continue to evolve over time. Second is make sure your incentives are lined up, because that's a huge failure in many companies. That's a big part of the 70% failure rate that Ken Blanchard Companies reports, is that companies don't have their performance and their key performance indicators top level aligned with shifts that they've made. They haven't put new, either adapted the metrics or put new metrics in place, and then that doesn't chain down. It doesn't chain across people's performance requirements. Those need to adapt to the changes as well, so that you are focusing people on the behavior that you need to have now the change has been implemented. So that's the second. Third, look over the horizon. What are your sources of information? Who are you spending time with, so that you can see what's coming up? There's no guarantees. You know what? You'll be ahead of your competition if you're doing it, because most of them won't. And when it comes, it'll blindside them. So do you want to be blindsided? You want to be guaranteed of being blindsided? Or do you want to stay out front with the other leaders? I want to see you stay out front with the other leaders, because we need you there. Thanks for joining for Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf, and Broadcasters Unite is still going today. This is day 2. Is just amazing information in speakers. My colleague, Dr. Bill Janicek, had just finished, his video had just finished right before we started this. So the links are in the description. Join us there. See you there. And if you like what you're hearing, please click the like button. If you're watching this on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, please click the subscribe button, and hit notifications, so you get a heads up of when we've got something coming up for you. You'll know what the topics are, and I look forward to having you join in. And Carol, thank you so much. Thank you for taking notes. I appreciate that. And share what you're learning. Put it in the comments, because I love hearing back from people. That helps us shape future information, and it gives an opportunity for other people that are enjoying this episode, that are following the show. They can learn from you as well. So I know, particularly with Carol, as you're watching this, Carol's somebody you want to hear from, because I've known Carol for a number of years. Very, very sharp, fun to talk with. She's one of those special people that has mastery at what she does. She communicates in a way that's fun to spend time with her and to learn from her. And it's just an honor to have her here as well. So I'm going to jump back over to Broadcasters Unite. It's great talking with you. This is Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf. We'll see you on the trail.